So I am just a few hours north of Seattle, a beautiful part. In fact, Canada is not too far away. And I am testing out this new Mammoth trailer. I'm pulling it with an AEV Bison. It's a dual axle trailer, certainly meant for overland travel and for sleeping and living inside. Let's take a look. All right, let's talk through the exterior features here of the Mammoth Overland trailer. So you can see that this is a full stand-up height trailer with a robust access door. It's got 10 gallons of auxiliary fuel on the back. This ladder flips down easily. Lots of really good angles. You can see the departure angle is excellent. This is a dual axle, which for such a short trailer actually does a lot to improve the off-road capabilities. It also really makes a difference in how the load is distributed. So it takes a lot of that tongue weight off of the tow vehicle. This is a flip down table. Here you've got access to exterior water. You have access to your hot water system, water fill, power fill. This is also your exterior kitchen. With a fridge. You can see you've got 50 gallons of water in here, which is a lot of water storage. And a bunch of extra storage for camping gear. You got the turn flat windows, which are dual glazed, but they just look really good compared to the old style. On the front, we can see that we've got a set of max tracks. We have 2 spare tires, which I'd probably only go with 1 since you have dual axles without a lot of droop in that Timbren suspension. You could easily get away with just 1 spare tire. You got some additional fuel capability here, and you've got your propane tank. I'd like to see 2 smaller tanks as opposed to 1 large tank. In general, you want to have 2 smaller tanks. Bunch of tools mounted to the front, which is really nice for trail work. We've got a heavy duty drawbar lift here and a really long drawbar, which is nice because of the long wheelbase on this truck. So it's a better match to the wheelbase of the tow vehicle. All right, so this door covers just about the entire back of the trailer. The trailer has some really good departure angle, so that's why it has this flip down step here. So when you walk inside, it's a pretty easy process, and they've actually thought it out pretty well. So you can close the door here, and it kind of latches in place. All right, you can pull this step up into place like that, and then it just requires this little pin to come across here and lock. All right, when that's all locked up here, it is a pretty secure place to be. You can see how it even follows the angle. I'm not getting much leaking into the trailer, which it speaks to a couple different things. First of all, the company specializes in making aircraft, so they have really high engineering, design, and assembly standards. And they're also based here in the Pacific Northwest, so they are used to building things that don't leak. Most of the time when we find leaky campers and trailers, it's just they're being manufactured in a place where they don't get steady rain like this. I've actually had steady rain for almost 2 days straight, and I'm just getting a few little points of ingress of water. All right, let's talk through how this trailer is laid out. So this is a really interesting solution here. It's clearly made for small families. So you actually have 2 bunks. So you have an upper bunk, and this part folds down, actually locks into place. It's very robust. And then it has a netting system, kind of like what you'd have in a sailboat when you're heeled over to keep people from falling out. So you actually lock in these seat belts in the corners, and then a net comes up, and that actually keeps everybody in place. Here we've kind of got our main switch and instrument panel. This is how you turn on the inverter. It's how you turn on the rock lights, the interior fans, the floor lighting, the overhead lighting and the water pump. And then on the left side here, you got quite a bit of storage, place for keeping trash and other sundries with these little nets. And there's a heavy duty grab bar that you would use if you wanted to pull yourself up into the trailer. And then they use these high quality turn Overland windows. I like them just because they hold up well. They actually are meant to be used in these kinds of conditions. And the other thing that I like is that you can position these shades to either go up or down. Personally, I've never understood why people make them go down like that, because you're looking for privacy. So technically the privacy shade should be coming up. That way you can have the privacy shade, maybe at this height or whatever for obvious reasons. And then you're just bringing down the little vent shade here at the top. But for some reason, most manufacturers put them on the other way. But with the turn Overland windows, you can flip them the other direction, which is how I would do it. And then we've got our shower and bathroom. It's actually pretty roomy. It's got quite a bit of space. It's an on-demand propane hot water shower, and it's actually just on the other side of these controls. So when you flip on the pump, you actually get a really strong stream of water out of that. And that all drains down into the floor. You can put a bucket up underneath to catch the gray water if there are requirements for that. You can also see the recess here for a fairly large capacity porta potty. You could also run some of the new composting units, which I would prefer in a scenario like this. And then you've got a big overhead fan to draw out all of the hot steam, or just to evacuate moisture from the shower. Another little storage cubby up here. And then this is kind of your main storage area. This is probably where you would keep clothes, other bedding, things of that sort. And it's all of their systems here are actually pretty simple. So there's a button that you push in, and that gets this panel to pass by. And then you've got, see, some bedding, lots of blankets. I'm really glad there was lots of blankets. I'll talk about that in a second. And then in the bottom there, you've got some kitchen sundries. But it's a pretty clever setup how it will come up and then into place with this button, or you can pull on these straps and just access the lower level. So heavy duty mesh flooring here, easy to clean up. Nice little step for getting into the bed if needed. 120 volt outlet, bunch of storage up underneath using the nets again. And then this is the lower bunk or the settee. So this would be like a couch that you would use. This does not have a traditional dinette, although I think it would be very easy for them to incorporate one. You would just have this panel go up and secure up high, and then you would have a dinette down below, which I think for most remote workers, they would probably prefer a dinette because there is no table in here for working, although it wouldn't be difficult to attach a table onto that wall and swing it into position so that you could sit on your laptop and work. Got a nice storage shelf here. All right, and then under the bed, you can see here we have a small access panel that actually gets you into the main storage unit up underneath, and the inverter and the other electronics. You can see the fuse panel, etc., up underneath there. That's where all the relays are for controlling the various switches throughout the cabin. You can see this is a nice thick mattress, probably 4.5 inches to 5 inches or so. And if this camper had any superpower, it's the fact that this is a king size bed. Normally in a camper of this size, and the fact that it's as wide as it is, you would go with an east-west configuration and sleep across this way. But they actually chose to put an emphasis on the comfort and size of the bed. So they actually have it a full king, and it is super comfortable. So there's a little bit of space up underneath here for some feet. And then you got a pretty tall ceiling a vent right overhead. I believe that they're going to make available an air conditioning unit. You have charging ports on each side for the occupants, for them to charge. You also have a carbon monoxide tester here as well. A couple USB outlets, 12-volt outlets. No USB-C. I'd like to see USB-C in those slots. I'd also like to see one or the other of those. You can sacrifice one of the USB-C slots and actually give us a voltmeter in the outlet, because we want to see what the condition is of the battery when we're in bed. So we want to know without having, especially in very cold conditions, we don't want to have to get out of bed just to check and see what our battery status is. So it's really important that there is a voltmeter that's visible from the bed. And normally camper manufacturers address that just by positioning it so you can see it from the bed. But in this case, that's not possible because where it's at near the door. So we just want to put a simple 12-volt voltmeter in with the USB-C outlet. They're available, and that would be a great addition to this camper. You can see on the back here is our LED light array configurator. You can change the colors and all kinds of other things right there. And one of my favorite heaters of all time is the Dickinson, the Newport. This is one of their more advanced units. It's a little less purely mechanical. It has a couple safety features in place that check to make sure that it is ignited and burning, and it can shut off the gas. So I've actually had some trouble with this one running. I've used these in sailboats and I've used them in my own campers, and I normally just get the one that's all mechanical with the exception of a thermal coupler. This does have the thermal coupler, but even if the thermal coupler is staying open, it's only running for about 25-30 seconds or so after that before it flames out. So it's not normally an issue with these units, but it's been a cold couple nights because the Dickinson hasn't been functioning quite properly. But they are really, really comfortable. Couple things that I like about them. So you start them by, you basically turn this gas here, you press that on. You can see the gas is running in there, and you got to keep this held down for a little bit because you want the thermal coupler to get hot enough to stay open. That's just like an old school stove would do. And you just kind of hold it down. You got to usually go for about 30 seconds or so. And then this is a fan button here, a fan knob. So once the unit's turned on, there actually will be a fan that blows across the surface, the hot surface of the fireplace, and then it comes out of these side vents and actually will keep the place super cozy, even on a low fan speed. In fact, this thing is maybe a little bit even oversized for the space. So, I mean, even if you were down in well into the minus temperatures, these propane fireplaces work awesome. The only limitation you really get is in very, very cold conditions, you can actually have trouble with the propane flowing properly. So just something to be aware of. But you can see the cozy little flame going in there. And I'm still holding down on this button because I'm seeing if it will stay on. You can see the flame on the inside, and it's staying on. So, of course, just as I'm wrapping things up, the thing decides to work. So you can hear this fan coming on here, and that blows air across all of this surface and just really gives a nice flame. Well, that's nice to see that it's working. So you can access this storage area here on the left. Then you got a couple other turn Overland. This is their new flat acrylic windows, which are just really attractive. And because they're tighter up against the vehicle, they're a little bit less likely to get scratches on them. But they just look really modern, clean up against the side of the vehicle. A clever way that they addressed kind of a headboard is with these kind of little art panels. These are like soft art panels up here for your heads. And then of course they've got, because it's Mammoth Overland, they've got the Mammoth pillows even in place. And it did run for longer than it has for the trip, but it's still flamed out at a couple minutes in, which is, it's too bad, because it would have been a lot more comfortable for me having a heater in these high 30s, low 40s wet conditions here in Washington. All right, so let's go through my pros and cons here on the interior of the Mammoth Overland trailer. This is really centered around the fact that it's an incredibly comfortable place to sleep. So you have a huge king-size bed, lots and lots of room for sleeping. You've got a fireplace right there in the area that should function properly. The one that I was using was struggling a little bit, but that would be a very cozy, comfortable, warm place to spend time. I'm also impressed by the fact that even though I've had days and days of rain, I'm just not getting very many leaks into the trailer, and the ones that are coming through are very minor. So they've done an excellent job of managing leaks. And this is the prototype, so this is very early production product. The other thing I really like about it is it has a good sized bathroom. It has 50 gallons of water on board, so you'll be able to take, you know, many days of showers even with 2 people. I like that a lot. There's quite a bit of storage, more storage than I was expecting in a trailer this size. But then let's talk through a couple of the cons. I think that they need to make it optional to have a dinette. So they need to make that upper bunk platform go up instead of down, and then they need to have a traditional dinette. Now the dinette can still drop and become a small bed, maybe for a smaller child, but in most cases, once you have a trailer this size, you really want to have a spot that you can sit down and eat, sit at a table, do some work, and it's just not configured that way. It's configured only for 2 bunks. So I'd like to see that. And then the third thing that I would say is a more notable con is the fact that you have no access to a galley on the inside. Normally in a configuration like this, you'd want to at least have access to the fridge. So think about making coffee in the morning. You'd have to get out of the trailer, go outside, you know, run the stove, heat up water, or you'd have to have a kettle on the inside here, which would be a possibility. But I would like to have a way to do some light meal prep on the inside, and then certainly access the fridge. You want to be able to access a fridge from the inside and the out of the vehicle or of the trailer. And that's just because weather like I'm dealing with right now, you got to get like really prepped to go outside because it's raining so much. And then you got to deal with the elements because the kitchen is only on the outside. So as a result, I've just kind of stuck with easy to access bars and other meals like that, where normally if you have a way to cook on the inside, or at least meal prep, or at least access the fridge on the inside, I think is really important. So those are the few cons that I've got. Overall, the construction of this trailer is impressive. It's clearly designed for a lifetime of service and to be very serviceable. So anytime you're dealing with an aircraft company, you're just looking at a much higher quality execution. In fact, one of the highest quality executions that I've seen in a trailer in a very, very long time. And that's going to serve Mammoth well as they go through the different configurations and meet the needs of their customers. Let's talk a little bit about how it is to pull the tall boy. I'm towing it with a Chevy Bison. It's modified a little bit, got a couple inch lift, looks like about a 34-inch diameter Firestone all-terrain tire. These are great little trucks, super capable, rear locker, front locker, low range, multimatic suspension system, all the things that you kind of want on a mid-sized truck. And it's doing a good job of pulling it. This vehicle has about a 5,000 pound tow rating, and the tall boy comes in at 2,900 pounds. I think this one's a little bit heavier. That might be dry weight. And it looks like that the gross vehicle weight rating of the camper is coming in at 5,200 pounds. So you'll just want to be a little mindful of not overloading it because of the limits of the axle and the limits of most tow vehicles. So you want to just be a little mindful about how much gear you put in there, because there is quite a bit of storage to put additional components. One thing that I did note is that the drawbar length is adjustable, so you can adjust it based upon the tow vehicle, which I think is really important. You don't want to have too long of a drawbar or too short of a drawbar, so that the trailer performs properly in a tight turn or when backing up. You also want to make sure that you're not coming in contact with the tow vehicle when you're coming through a ditch, or when you're doing a really tight turn. You don't want to be contacting the tow vehicle. And that's where an adjustable drawbar length is really an advantage. The tongue weight comes in at about 400 pounds, which, depending on how heavy you have the vehicle loaded, it could either be a little bit too light, or it could be a little bit too heavy, depending on the tow vehicle. So you want to be really mindful of where you're positioning your load. You want your tongue weight to come in at about 15% or so of the weight of the trailer. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but the most important one is we want to control trailer sway. And you do that by making sure that you have sufficient tongue weight. We also don't want the tongue weight to be too much, because these are lighter duty vehicles. And so, for example, on this Colorado, you've got a payload somewhere around 1,000 pounds. So if you were to get that tongue weight up over 400 or 500 pounds, you now only have about 500 or 600 pounds left of payload in the vehicle, which you talk about 2 occupants. This particular truck has a rack, a Lightner rack, and some other things on it. So it would be very easy to overload the payload of a vehicle with a heavier tongue weight. So you really want to make sure that you're putting most of the equipment in the trailer so that you're working against gross combined vehicle weight rating, and you want to try to keep the tow vehicle as light as possible for performance overall. You want to be really mindful of that tongue weight is also part of the payload of the tow vehicle. So we want to be keeping track of not only payload, but we want to be keeping track of the gross combined vehicle weight rating of the tow vehicle. But so far, this long wheelbase, wide track, mid-sized truck is towing this little trailer like a dream. The fact that it's dual axle is a bit unusual given the overall length of only 16 feet. So there's some advantages to that. So I find that you're adding some weight, but you're also adding quite a bit of stability and overall performance to the trailer, because the distance from the drawbar of the trailer hitch to the first axle center line of the first axle on the trailer is actually a little bit shorter, so you end up with a more nimble trailer. You also get to spread that load out over 4 tires as opposed to 2, and then on a suspension like the Timbren, which it's not long travel, you actually don't need as many spare tires as you think you do, because on this trailer I would only fit it with 1 spare tire, because in the event that you were off highway and you lost a second tire, so you lost the first one, you used the spare tire for it, you lost a second tire, it would be very easy just to remove that flat tire completely and run with just 1 tire on that one side of the trailer. You got to be a little mindful of ground clearance because the axle will drop down slightly, but overall, because it's short travel, the Timbren, and the trailer isn't that heavy, you could easily get out on just 1 tire. So that's a way to save some of that tongue weight, is by removing one of those spare tires on the front. But I do like the fact that it's dual axle. I'm finding that it actually performs really well here on the trail. And it's surprising to see dual axles on only a 16-foot overall length trailer. But so far, it's actually performing really nicely.